How is it possible that a 28-year-old man, who only a few years ago was still regarded merely as a teen idol, is now capable of silencing global media newsrooms, making industry analysts furrow their brows, and leaving the public wondering, is this wealth figure truly real, or is it merely the small visible tip of a much larger iceberg? This very question has quietly rolled behind sensational headlines, half-whispered financial reports, and academic discussions that have begun to insert one recurring name, Jungkook, into serious examinations of the global cultural economy. Beyond anyone's expectations, Jungkook BTS's wealth has not only shocked observers, but has also shaken the way the world perceives South Korea's entertainment industry. For years, Jungkook was known to the public as the Golden Magne, a nickname that sounded warm, almost sweet, as if describing the youngest member whose extraordinary talent still existed within the shadow of a group system called BTS. However, as report after report began citing an estimated net worth of around $50 million, or more than 700 billion rupiah based on the current exchange rate, that long-standing narrative slowly collapsed. Media outlets that once focused solely on musical achievements shifted toward a far more provocative question. Since when did a K-pop idol become an economic entity with shock value comparable to that of a major corporation? Born in Busan on September 1, 1997, Jungkook grew up far removed from the glitter of wealth. His childhood was shaped by training, failure, and intense competition, not by overflowing bank accounts or elite privilege. When he passed Big Hit Entertainment's audition at the age of 13, almost no one predicted that the decision would become one of the most profitable human investments in modern entertainment history. BTS's debut in 2013 did not promise luxury either. They were newcomers in a harsh, hierarchical, and fiercely competitive industry. Yet it was there that the initial foundation was laid, not only for artistic success, but also for the massive economic engine that would later emerge as BTS evolved into a global phenomenon. Jungkook grew not merely as the youngest member, but as a gravitational center that was impossible to ignore. His role as main vocalist and main dancer, combined with a powerful visual image, made him a cross-cultural magnet for attention. His solo songs such as Begin, Euphoria, and My Time were not only personal expressions, but high-value cultural products that moved massively through the global market. Every stream, every download, every stadium play or digital platform rotation slowly accumulated into figures that now leave the media stunned. The greatest shock, however, came when Jungkook fully stepped into his role as a soloist at the peak of his career. The year 2023 marked a turning point that was not only historic, but also economic. His single 7, a collaboration with Latto, exploded beyond any expectation. Debuting at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 was not merely an artistic achievement. It was a loud signal to the industry that Jungkook had broken through the highest layer of the global music market. When the song became the fastest to reach 1 billion streams on Spotify, many media outlets realized that they were not reporting on ordinary success, but on the birth of an extraordinarily efficient value-generating machine. At this point, the narrative surrounding Jungkook's wealth changed dramatically. He was no longer viewed simply as a beneficiary of group success, but as an active agent within the creative economic ecosystem. His involvement in producing BTS songs such as Magic Shop and Your Eyes Tell, as well as the group's Grammy nomination, reinforced that his contribution carried structural weight rather than decorative value. Every production credit, every license, every international royalty became a puzzle piece explaining why his wealth surged in a way that left many observers silent. Beyond music, another dimension that amplified media shock was Jungkook's appeal in the global endorsement arena. When he was announced as a global ambassador for Calvin Klein in 2023, market responses occurred almost instantly. Public attention surged, campaigns went viral across borders, and one undeniable fact emerged. Jungkook was not merely an advertising face, but a driver of consumer behavior. His collaborations with technology, automotive, and cosmetics brands further solidified this position. In the attention economy era, his massive fan base on platforms like TikTok, where he broke viewership records, transformed into a tangible asset whose value could be calculated, analyzed, and traded on a global scale. Yet what shocked the media most was not merely the size of the numbers, but the intelligence behind them. Jungkook is known for carefully managing his income, including investing in luxury real estate in Seoul worth millions of dollars. These properties are not merely symbols of status, but long-term financial instruments that strengthen his wealth portfolio. Combined with income from YouTube, licensing, and merchandising, a personal economic structure emerges that is far more complex than what is typically associated with a pop idol. Ironically, amid this extraordinary accumulation of wealth, Jungkook is widely known as a philanthropic figure. His donations to education, disaster relief, and children's welfare are often made without excessive publicity. This is where the emotional layer of the story deepens. Media outlets that initially approached with suspicion and sensationalism are gradually confronted with a paradox. How can someone be so wealthy, yet still maintain an empathetic image and a strong sense of social responsibility? This question lingers, opening a new layer of understanding in the Jungkook phenomenon. The first chapter of this story does not end with numbers, but with a broader awareness. Jungkook BTS's wealth is not merely a shocking financial statistic, but a reflection of changing times, where talent, technology, global fandom, and personal strategy converge at a single point. And if this opening chapter alone has already left the media astonished, the remaining question becomes even more tantalizing. Just how far will Jungkook's true value surpass every existing estimate? If you wish, I am ready to continue with Chapter 2, focusing on global media analysis, comparisons with world stars, and speculation about hidden figures, with sharper and more controversial intensity. After reports about Jungkook BTS's wealth began circulating widely, the reaction of international media shifted from mere shock to a form of intellectual skepticism. Is $50 million truly enough to represent the real value of someone like Jungkook? Or is that figure simply a conservative estimate, overly cautious for an individual whose influence cuts across industries, cultures, and global markets? These questions have begun to surface repeatedly in entertainment finance reports, academic discussions on the creative economy, and media analyses that previously had never taken the world of K-pop seriously. In many Western newsrooms, Jungkook is no longer positioned solely as an artist. He is increasingly analyzed as an individual brand with extraordinary leverage. This phenomenon is compelling because it differs sharply from the old patterns of the entertainment industry, where a star's financial value was often tied to film contracts, physical album sales, or large-scale tours. Jungkook transcends that model. He exists in an era where streaming, algorithms, digital fandoms, and personal image converge to form a new economic ecosystem. In this context, his wealth is not merely the product of hard work, but the result of a strategic position at the center of global currents. The media have also begun comparing Jungkook to figures once considered untouchable by Asian artists. Major names from the American music industry, Hollywood actors, and even world-class athletes are frequently used as benchmarks. What makes these comparisons controversial is the reality that Jungkook, across many metrics of digital influence and audience engagement, actually surpasses some of them. Every post, every public appearance, every music release generates measurable economic ripples. This is why some analysts describe Jungkook's wealth as a phenomenon that has not yet been fully understood. One aspect most often overlooked by the public is the intangible value attached to him. Jungkook does not only generate direct income, he also drives massive economic value for others. BTS tours energize the tourism industry, merchandise fuels global production chains, and endorsements shape consumer behavior across generations. From the perspective of cultural economics, Jungkook functions as a catalyst. When he appears in a campaign, its value does not merely increase, it surges at a speed rarely seen. South Korean media face a unique dilemma of their own. On one hand, there is pride in seeing a national figure become a global icon with extraordinary wealth. On the other, sensitive discussions arise around economic inequality, social responsibility, and the pressures that accompany such status. Jungkook, known for being relatively private about his personal life, becomes the center of often excessive speculation. Yet it is precisely his silence that strengthens the aura of mystery, pushing the public to wonder even more. What is really happening behind the scenes? When reports mention Jungkook's property investments in Seoul, Valued at millions of dollars, many international outlets began to interpret this as a sign of financial maturity. He does not simply spend his wealth on symbols of luxury, but channels it into long-term assets. In an industry frequently marked by stories of financial downfall, this approach is seen as a positive anomaly. Jungkook appears to understand that popularity is volatile, while assets and income diversification are the keys to sustainability. Equally fascinating is the role of social media in amplifying his economic value. Platforms like TikTok are no longer just spaces for entertainment. They are global markets operating around the clock. Jungkook, supported by an exceptionally active fan base, indirectly commands attention flows on a scale that is difficult to rival. Every trend involving his name triggers a domino effect, from spikes in streaming numbers to surges in product sales. Media outlets that once underestimated the power of fandom are now forced to acknowledge it as a new economic force that cannot be ignored. Yet amid all this rational analysis, there is an emotional layer that makes Jungkook's story far more complex. He is not someone who openly flaunts his wealth. Instead, stories about donations, charitable giving, and involvement in social causes often surface quietly, without excessive exposure. For some media, this becomes a second shock as powerful as the wealth figures themselves. How can someone with such immense financial value still choose a path of empathy and social contribution? This question sparks deeper discussions about the ethics of wealth in the era of global celebrity. To this point, it is clear that Jungkook BTS's wealth is no longer just a sensational headline. It has evolved into a case study of how an individual can combine talent, strategy, technology, and personal values to build sustainable influence. Media that were once merely astonished now write in a more reflective tone, as if realizing they are witnessing a paradigm shift. Jungkook is not a coincidental exception, but a symbol of a new generation of global icons. This second chapter shows that media shock was only the initial stage. Beneath it lies a process of recalibrating perspectives, from viewing Jungkook as an idol to recognizing him as a complex economic and cultural force. And as the media begin to recalculate, one realization becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Perhaps the world has not yet fully grasped just how great Jungkook's true value really is. As the media begin to run out of words to describe Jungkook BTS's wealth today, a far more unsettling and tantalizing question emerges. Is the world witnessing the peak of his fortune, or merely the beginning of something far greater? At an age still considered young by global career standards, Jungkook stands at what many analysts describe as an acceleration point, a moment when influence, reputation, and economic value converge into a sharply rising trajectory. Jungkook's future prospects are not determined solely by his next musical release, but by a position that has already taken root across multiple sectors. Music is merely one gateway. Fashion, digital media, investment, and even cultural diplomacy now move within the same orbit. Every step Jungkook takes, whether on stage or away from the spotlight, carries the potential to generate new value. This is precisely why many media outlets have begun to write their predictions with caution, seemingly aware that they may once again be shocked by far larger figures in the future. BTS as a group remains a powerful foundation, yet Jungkook's solo career demonstrates his ability to stand as an independent entity without losing his collective identity. This balance is rare and difficult to replicate. Within the industry, it places him in an almost ideal position, benefiting from a massive institutional system while retaining personal flexibility. It is therefore unsurprising that his wealth is projected to continue growing, potentially surpassing the estimates currently circulating in public discourse. Yet beneath all financial speculation lies a dimension that keeps this story deeply human and emotional. Jungkook has never openly defined himself through wealth. He speaks more often about music, process, and his relationship with fans. This paradox is what gives his narrative its enduring power. While the media remain busy calculating numbers, Jungkook appears to move forward quietly, allowing his work to speak for itself. Ultimately, Jungkook BTS's wealth is not merely about money. It is a symbol of a shifting global landscape, proof that a young man from Busan can transcend the boundaries of industry, culture, and global perception. Media shock may fade over time, but the impact of this journey will continue to resonate. And when the history of K-pop is eventually rewritten through an economic and cultural lens, one name seems destined to receive its own chapter: Jungkook, a figure whose wealth not only exceeds expectations but also transcends the traditional ways the world understands success. Beyond this, observers have begun to raise a possibility that once seemed too bold to voice openly. Could Jungkook become a new benchmark for individual wealth in the K-pop industry, or even across Asia as a whole? If current trends in digital influence, global expansion, and income diversification continue on the same trajectory, discussions of his wealth will no longer be relevant only in the context of today, but as long-term projections capable of reshaping the entertainment industry itself. Jungkook, whether consciously or not, stands at a historical crossroads where every personal decision carries systemic implications. What makes this future even more compelling is the uncertainty that paradoxically strengthens his position. The world does not yet know which direction Jungkook will choose next, and it is precisely this open space that gives him strategic value. In the attention economy, uncertainty can be just as valuable as certainty. As long as Jungkook maintains balance between artistry, image, and personal values, he will not only remain relevant but may ultimately become a classic case study in how modern success is created, sustained, and preserved within global memory. There is also a growing belief among cultural economists that Jungkook represents a structural shift rather than an isolated success story. His rise signals a transformation in how value is produced in the global entertainment economy, where emotional attachment, digital participation, and cultural resonance translate directly into measurable financial power. Unlike traditional celebrities whose influence fades with changing trends, Jungkook's relevance appears to regenerate itself through continuous interaction with a global audience that feels personally invested in his journey. This dynamic positions Jungkook not merely as a beneficiary of the system, but as an active force reshaping it. His career illustrates how modern wealth is increasingly tied to trust, authenticity, and long-term narrative rather than short-term spectacle. As institutions, brands, and even governments observe this phenomenon, Jungkook's trajectory may influence how future artists are cultivated, valued, and protected. In this sense, his wealth becomes more than a personal milestone. It evolves into a blueprint, hinting at a future where cultural impact and economic power are no longer separate conversations, but two sides of the same global story.